Welcome to the Knowledge Seeker channel. The channel is dedicated to exploring critical issues in the world. This presentation is titled The Difference Between African and Western Views about the World and Aliens or UFOs. The purpose of this presentation is to examine the difference between African and Western views about the world and aliens and or UFOs. In order to accomplish the goals of the presentation, the following arguments are made. 1. Prior to the European Renaissance, African and Western views about the world and aliens or UFOs were similar in thought and beliefs. 2. Due to the European Renaissance, resulting in reason and logic, science and secular humanism, Western thought changed and focuses singularly on the physical, material, tangible quality of nature and ignore the non-physical, immaterial, intangible quality of nature and the universe. And 3. The African view of the world recognizes both the physical, material, tangible, and the non-physical, immaterial, intangible qualities of the world. Now, let's briefly look at the subject matter. It appears that at one time in the history of the world, every region of the world, including Africa, the Americas, Asia, Australia, Europe, and so forth, had a uniformity of view concerning the world and aliens or UFOs. During that time, the knowledge of the world relied on studying, observing, and applying knowledge based on information gathered through 6 senses rather than 5. This meant that there was a general agreement that comprehensive knowledge involves the application of 6 senses. This further meant that a complete or comprehensive knowledge about any phenomenon included both the physical, tangible, material, and the intangible, immaterial, mystical, and spiritual qualities of the object being studied. Generally, the physical, tangible, material component of knowledge includes mostly information gathered through the 5 senses. The 5 senses are 1. Hearing, 2. Sight, 3. Touch, 4. Smell, and 5. Taste. The 6th sense involves the intangible, immaterial, spiritual, mystical quality of knowledge of nature and the universe. Some people refer to the 6th sense as the universal consciousness that radiates around the world and enables humans and other animals to have intuitive or psychic ability to perceive the physically invisible aspects of reality. This component of knowledge comes under the immaterial, spiritual, intangible, mystical methodology. As a result of the view that a complete or comprehensive knowledge involves the study and understanding of six senses, every part of the world, including Africa and Europe, had scientists, shamans, spiritualists, herbalists, religious priests and priestesses with spiritual capabilities, medical practitioners, and paranormal psychologists. This is why in some parts of Europe there were the Druids, Volvas, Cereses, shaman, who served as religious priests, spiritualists, herbalists, medical practitioners, and paranormal psychologists. This is why in many parts of Europe in the past, there were references to the existence of other beings, such as souls of the dead, gods, goddesses, deities, angels, fairies, elves, selkies, dwarfs, hobbits, leprechaun, and so forth. In Africa, there were and continue to be a belief in God, the souls of the dead, gods, goddesses, angels, dwarfs, mermaids, spirits, jinn, and other beings. In fact, the Europeans confirmed the duality of the world, just as the Africans through naming the week, months, and planets after their deities, that is, their gods and goddesses. For instance, for the days of the week, you have what? One, Sunday, named after God, soul, or sun. Two, you have Monday, named after God, Lun or moon. Three, you have Tuesday, named after God of war, Mars. Four, Wednesday is named after God, Mercury. 5. Thursday is named after God Jupiter or Jove or Zeus in Greek. Friday is named after goddess Venus or Aphrodite in Greek. Saturday is named after God Saturn. So you can see all these are names of deities that the Romans, the Greeks used to name the days of the week, which is a testament to their acceptance of the fact that deities existed in Europe. The Europeans also had festivals dedicated to honoring the deities, and there are many examples to cite from. 1. Easter, originally known as Astartes, in Europe known as Istra, the goddess of heaven or harvest, celebrated during the vernal equinox. 2. Lemuria, to honor and placate the dead on May 13 in Rome. 3. Samhain. This took place on October 31st to celebrate the end of harvest and honor the dead and deities. Today, Samhain is celebrated as Halloween, especially in the United States. 4th, the night of mystical revelry. This is to honor Pomona, the goddess of gardens and harvest, on November 1. And 5, Christmas Day, which is also referred to as winter solstice, used to honor the deities on December 25. Today, the Christians celebrate it as the day in which Jesus Christ was born. This is Jupiter, a picture of the god Jupiter. This is an African god of the sky. This is Oya, storm goddess in Yoruba land. This is Bendis, the goddess of the hunt. This is a European goddess. Now, let's look at how the Western world changed from accepting duality of the world and changing into a one world view of the world. However, the emergence of reason, modern science, and secular humanism following the European Renaissance in the Middle Ages, especially in the 16th century, dramatically changed the European perception of knowledge of the world. Instead of acquiring knowledge based on studying, observing, experimenting, and applying information based on the utilization of the six senses, the effort was reduced to the five physical senses. This meant that due to the influence of reason and logic, modern science, and secular humanism, the sixth sense was eliminated since materiality and factuality are the cardinal basis of scientific objectivity. Thus, any phenomenon or variable or thing that cannot be perceived through the five senses, that is, not subject to observation, quantification, categorization, and measurement, is considered scientifically untenable. Basically, the West has eliminated the non-physical, immaterial, intangible component of knowledge and rely mostly on the scientific view of the world. It might be necessary to see the change by discussing the Western and African views of various phenomena in the world, including aliens and/or UFOs today. Thus, with the adoption of reason and logic, secular humanism and science, the West changed from a dualistic, that is, physical and spiritual view of the world to one of purely physical, material, tangible manifestation. The implications of the change in the Western view of the world as dictated by science are far-reaching. 1. The Western one world view. Today, the West reduces the universe to only the physically observable quality of nature and the universe. This means that the world is limited to phenomena that can be seen, heard, touched, smelled, and tasted. The reason is that these five senses represents the qualities of the physical world that can scientifically be observed, investigated, and experimented through systematic gathering, classification, quantification, and interpretation of data to ensure factuality. This implies that there are no other beings apart from humans. This is despite the fact that prior to the emergence of modern science, the West, like Africa, believed in the existence of physical and non-physical worlds, as typified by Greek, Roman, Irish, Scandinavian, German, and Scottish stories of the presence of gods, goddesses, angels, fairies, leprechauns, selkies, elves, hobbits, dwarfs, mermaids, and so forth. The West now refers to these beings as mythological fantasies of human imagination that do not exist in the physical realm. 2. Secular humanism. To reinforce the one physical world view, the West strongly believes in the principle of secular humanism, where humans are believed to possess the qualities and logical reasoning capability to make rational decisions about their existence without having to rely on a higher authority, whether God or gods, goddesses, angels, mermaids, elves, dwarfs, hobbits, fairies, leprechauns, and so forth. Thus, man becomes godlike and does not need the assistance of any other higher authority to make decisions about his or her existence. As a result, religion is not necessary in secular thinking, even though millions of Westerners subscribe to Christianity and other religions. Since Western nations operate based on secular humanism, laws are basically the products of human legislative creation for purpose of enhancing order and protecting life and property in society. Hence, the law has nothing to do with God or a higher authority, and neither is it a product of religious influence. This allows Western citizens to express themselves and participate in the political system without being compelled to embrace any religious faith. It guarantees freedom of expression. 3. Science. Let's see how the West uses science to change its worldview. What is science? Science can be defined as the study of the structure, characteristics, and behavior of the physical, natural, and social world through systematic investigation, observation, and experimentation. It is a process or a means to understand how the natural world works. Thus, scientific knowledge can only be acquired through systematic gathering, classification, and interpretation of data that have been carefully investigated, observed, and experimented upon. The West has invested so much on the view that only scientific information is necessary for studying and understanding nature and the universe that it does not appreciate other methodologies for providing alternative information. Why? Because science is a major source of financial and economic earner to the extent that the West insists without any hesitation that any knowledge gained through other methodologies is insufficient to establish a factual understanding of nature and the universe. Therefore, the West expects the world to accept this view of reality, even if science is incapable of arriving at a convincing conclusion about some of its assertions. Now, let's look at the cost of scientific investment. In other words, science is a big business. About $1.6 trillion or 1.85% of gross domestic product of the world was invested in science, research and development in 2014. In the United States, in the same year, about 71% of the investment in research and development was done by the private sector, while the government invested 21% and the non-profit sector contributed 4%. The cost of scientific investment. Likewise, in 2021, in the United States, scientific research and development investment total about $789.1 billion. Out of this figure, the private sector funded $130 billion, or 22%. Government invested about 32% of the total US spending. The global investment in science and technology was over $2.2 trillion in 2021. The US led by funding 32% of the global investment and followed by China with 27% in the same 2021. The figure for the US global investment was expected to grow to about $885.6 billion in 2022. 4. Reason and faith. Due to the human intellectual capability, the world can be explained according to Western viewpoint based on reason and logic alone. This presupposes that every phenomenon in nature and the universe can be explained rationally through the application of mathematics, physics, chemistry, and logic. This view prompted Isaac Newton to say that the universe operates on the laws of motion and not through a higher authority. As a result, the West relies almost exclusively on physical science and tries to dominate nature instead of working with nature. Due to the belief that every phenomenon in nature and the universe can be explained based on reason, faith is rejected. The reason is that faith does not subject itself to the five senses, hence cannot be quantified, measured, analyzed, because it falls under the realm of non-physical, immaterial, intangible quality of nature and the universe. Consequently, faith is part of the religious and spiritual world, which are not subject to scientific observation, measurement, analysis, and experimentation. Even though various societies in the West in the past accepted the existence of extraterrestrial or alien beings or UFOs, including gods, goddesses, fairies, dwarfs, leprechauns, elves, selkies, angels, and so forth, as typified by stories of ancient Greek, Roman, German, Scandinavian, English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, Romanian, and so forth. The West now insists that such beings do not exist because science has not been able to capture them in its method of inquiry. To investigate whether extraterrestrial or alien beings or UFOs exist, scientists rely on the following technologies to do so. A. Telescopes. They search for extraterrestrial intelligence, that is the SETI program. Gemini Observatory, the Webb telescope, satellites, radars, and other technological devices to attempt to find out whether aliens or UFOs exist. Thus, the West totally relies on technology, that is, physical devices, to find out whether aliens exist. Since scientists have not been able to detect any physical presence of aliens, they are inclined to say such beings do not exist because their instruments have not been able to capture those beings. This is the SETI program. You see, it is designed to see whether it will be able to capture any alien being in the atmosphere. Therefore, throughout the Western world where science reigns, if an individual encounters an extraterrestrial being or an UFO, the individual must keep the information to himself or herself. Otherwise, the person might be viewed as suffering from hallucination. The fear of being characterized as such has made it very difficult for Westerners to accept the view that there are other beings in the universe, and some of those beings live among human beings. Likewise, due to the influence of reason and logic and science, Western governments flatly reject the view that aliens or extraterrestrial beings exist in the universe. Due to the denial, many Western governments conduct and sponsor research on aliens or extraterrestrial beings secretly because they do not want their citizens to believe that indeed other beings exist in the world. Therefore, it was shocking to many Westerners when the former Defense Minister of Canada, Paul Hellyer, unhesitatingly declared that alien beings exist in the universe. While delivering a keynote address during the Disclosure Canada tour in the University of Calgary, he, and I quote, accused world powers of concealing the presence of aliens on Earth. He's calling on the government to release what he believes is hidden information about UFOs, and I unquote. Thus, while the West claims to be the freest region of the world, Western citizens do not have the liberty to discuss openly their encounters and experiences in dealing with aliens and UFOs. They must keep the information secretly or only tell trusted family members and friends. Some critics believe that due to the massive economic and financial wealth generated by science, Western governments do not want to devalue or demarket science by claiming that indeed aliens or UFOs exist. Such public admission could weaken the value of science, hence the unwillingness to accept the view that aliens exist. The Western discomfort in acknowledging the existence of other beings forced some scientists who were not convinced by various scientific explanations about many ancient artifacts on Earth, such as the sphere circles, Stonehenge, the pyramids in Egypt, Mexico, Guatemala, Peru, China, the huge human figures in Easter Island, crystal skulls, and so forth, to form the ancient alien astronaut theory. Through the ancient alien astronaut theory movement, some Western scientists agree with the global belief that other beings, that is, aliens, extraterrestrial entities, UFOs, USOs, exist in the world. So you have this group of Western scientists who break away from the orthodox scientific movement to form the Asian alien astronaut theory movement. A picture of alien beings. 6. The soul. Human soul. It is strongly believed in many parts of the world that human beings and other animals have souls. Thus, when a person dies, the physical body decays while the spiritual part of the body, which is the soul, never dies. Instead, it leaves the body and moves to a different dimension of the universe. The soul is like the individualized part of the universal consciousness. Scientists disagree because the concept of the soul is not amenable to physical detection as the scientific methodology demands. Because scientists disagree, the Western world too does not accept the existence of the soul, despite Greek, Roman, Christian, and Judaic beliefs about this idea. While Western scientists disagree about the concept of the soul, individuals who have experienced near-death experience confirm the existence of the soul. They speak about their soul leaving their physical bodies while they are about to die in the hospital. Although science does not allow scientists to accept the view, nevertheless, medical doctors and nurses who work in situations where individuals passed away temporarily can confirm stories told by those who have experienced the NDE. 7. Divination. Divination is a spiritual methodology for establishing contact or finding information through the application of mystical spiritual means. This methodology has been part of the human experience for thousands of years. However, due to Western reliance on the scientific methodology, divination, which falls under the realm of spirituality, since it is a method that deals with non-physical, immaterial, intangible quality of nature, is not accepted as a means for uncovering information in the West. Hence, information gathered through divination must be backed by science, otherwise it is not accepted in the West. 8. Scientific truth versus spiritual truth. As indicated above, the Western concept of truth or fact is based on scientific orientation and logical reasoning. Hence, a truth or fact is determined by physical or strong circumstantial evidence. In other words, the truth or fact is determined through observation, experimentation, and testing of variables. After experimentation and testing shows a strong evidence in support of a hypothesis, the result is considered a clear demonstration of the factuality or truth of the evidence. The same approach is used in the court of law to determine factuality or truth of a case if the evidence presented strongly supports a position taken by the prosecution. The evidence is considered factual, therefore true, to prove a case. Otherwise, the defendant wins the case for lack of physical or strong circumstantial evidence. Thus, in both at the scientific and legal levels, it is necessary to have physical evidence or strong circumstantial evidence to demonstrate factuality. This means that spiritual fact or truth is not accepted in the Western cultural orientation due to the influence of science, reason, and logic. As a result of Western devotion to the exploration of the physical, material, tangible quality of nature and the universe, the West is very advanced scientifically. It is the most scientifically advanced region of the world and serves as a template for scientific and technological development in other parts of the world. On the other hand, due to the dominance of reason and logic, science and secular humanism in Western thought, there is less attention paid to the non-physical, immaterial, intangible quality of the world. So, the West does not seem to pay much attention to spiritual knowledge since it is not capable of being scientifically measured, observed, and tested to determine factuality. However, there are secret societies in the West that are devoted to the study and enhancement of spiritual mystical knowledge. Thus, societies such as the Freemasonry, the Rosicrucian Society, Illuminati, the Knight of the Maccabees, the Knight of Pythias, Skull and Bones, the Bilderberg Group, Ancient Order of Urbani, Independent Order of Odd, Order Templis Orientis, and so forth exist. So even though the West does not accept the spiritual view of reality, there are societies in the West that are devoted to studying issues or things that are associated with spirituality. Generally, they are treated as esoteric groups. Now, let's look at the African view of the same variables that we just discussed concerning the Western world. So, B, African view of the world and aliens. In Africa, comprehensive knowledge involves the study and application of 6 senses, including hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, and intuitive psychic ability. This means that knowledge of the world involves the application of physical, material, tangible quality as well as the non-physical, immaterial, intangible spiritual quality of nature and the universe. The 6th sense involves the following. A. Developing alternate states of consciousness. B. using divination in attaining insights into ultimate or hidden truths. C. Using powers embedded in parapsychology, such as extrasensory perception in identifying hidden information. D. The use of telepathy, clairvoyance, and teleportation and levitation. E. The use of special herbs and herbal concoctions to connect to other spheres and beings. The ability to access the Akashic record of the universe. As a result of applying both physical as well as non-physical spiritual qualities of knowledge of the world, Africa views the world in both physical and non-physical perspectives. There are many ways to look at it. A. Human beings and other physical creatures make up of matter which dwell in the physical world. B. God, angels, gods, goddesses, angels, spirits, dwarfs, mermaids, elves, selkies, fairies, jinn, and the souls of the dead inhabits the non-physical, immaterial, and intangible world, according to the African view. Africans tend to believe that the two worlds, that is, the physical and spiritual worlds, interact, communicate, and share information. Thus, human contacts aliens and the aliens also contact human beings on daily basis in various forms. Of all the beings, humans are at the bottom of the pyramid and less knowledgeable compared to other beings, that is, aliens and UFOs. Generally, the spiritual world is believed in Africa to be greater than the physical world, since the physical world is a product of the spiritual world because the supreme intelligence is the creator of the universe. The spiritual world is considered greater than the physical world. Hence, Africans say that the world you do not see with your eyes is greater than the world you see with your eyes. Therefore, Africans tend to believe that those who are specially gifted can gain access to the spiritual world and interact with other beings and vice versa. 2. Secular humanism. While the West believes that humans have the intellectual acumen to make rational decisions and ensure their existence, Africans tend to believe that human beings are limited by their physical nature to make certain decisions. Hence, God or a higher authority whose capability transcends that of humans must be consulted to assist in making certain decisions. Thus, to get the absolute truth about any matter, Africans consult with higher beings. Traditionally, African cultures are theocratic. This means that traditional laws or rules have spiritual effects. Generally, the laws can be broken into two kinds, namely sacred laws and common laws. A. Sacred laws. Sacred laws originate from the traditional religions. These laws are like the Ten Commandments of the Bible and the Islamic Sharia. They spell out the do's and don'ts of society Sometimes they are referred to as abominations or taboos. Anyone who violates a sacred law or engages in an abominable act must confess and do atonement. Every ethnic and tribal group in Africa has its sacred laws or abominable acts. Unlike secular law, any individual who commits abomination, whether he or she has a PhD degree or is rich, must confess and do atonement because the ancestors, deities, gods, goddesses, and God will react to punish the individual and possibly other members of the family until confession is rendered. The second type of laws are the common laws. These kind of laws are like statutory laws. They do not have spiritual implications. However, they can be sanctified through the invocation of the ancestors, deities, and God to turn them into sacred laws. Generally, common laws are less serious compared to the abominations. In Africa, secular laws originate from Western colonialism and are the kinds of laws that almost all African states embrace. Secular laws are passed through legislation. They have no spiritual effect like the sacred traditional laws. The problem of secular laws is that while the states, that is like Ghana, Liberia, Niger, Senegal, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Cameroon, Mozambique, Ivory Coast, and so forth, embrace them, the ethnic groups that constitute the states operate theocratic laws in the form of abominations or taboos. This is why if an African state passes a secularized law through legislation that threatens the cultural order of the ethnic groups, the groups might oppose the legislation by arguing that it cannot contravene their sacred laws. In Africa, the Islamic Sharia also takes effect in Islamized countries and regions of the continent. The Islamic law is like the sacred African law and cannot be contravened. 3. Magical science in place of science. In Africa, both the scientific point of view and the spiritual point of view are accepted. This means that Africans use both the scientific and spiritual mystical methodologies to study and advance knowledge. However, it appears that there is a belief that the spiritual mystical method is likely to get to the absolute truth than the scientific method. The reason is that the scientific method is limited to the physical quality of nature and the universe, while the spiritual mystical method has no limitations in uncovering the truth of fact. Since Africa has a dual concept of the world, characterized by both physical material and the non-physical immaterial qualities, Africans tend to utilize the scientific and spiritual mystical methodologies in studying and comprehending nature and the universe in a concurrent manner. This means that, unlike in the West, in Africa, people are free to use the scientific method or the spiritual method or both without being accused of suffering from hallucination. Since Africans tend to believe that the spiritual world is much larger and advanced than the physical world, there is extensive utilization of the spiritual mystical methodology in advancing knowledge. Why? Due to the belief that God or a supreme intelligence created the world, there is a belief that any knowledge gained through the mystical spiritual method is more reliable than information gained through the scientific method in many instances. It should be noted that scientific knowledge about any phenomenon changes constantly as more discoveries are made. Third, the Egyptian god of knowledge, science, technology, moon, wisdom, writing, and medicine, also known as Hermes in Greek and Mercury in Rome, in the Emerald Tablet use the term magical science rather than science. Thus, magical science refers to a combination of both physical, material, and immaterial, mystical, spiritual knowledge of nature and the universe. The Toltecan view is compatible with the Sumerian and African views of science. As a result, the African view of science contains both physical and spiritual mystical knowledge of reality. 4. Reason and faith. Since Africans tend to believe in the existence of both physical, material, tangible world and the non-physical, immaterial, intangible world, they accept both reason and faith, with reason falling under the context of the physical, material, tangible world, and faith representing the non-physical, immaterial, intangible world. This means that in order to have a complete knowledge of nature and the universe, it is necessary to reason as well as to have faith. In the African world, reason and faith have a symbiotic relationship, unlike in the West. Because reason leads to the development of faith, just as faith leads to reason. Thus, it is impossible to have reason without faith, and it is impossible to have faith without reason. When a scientist rationalizes that science is the best methodology for studying and developing knowledge about nature and the universe, the reasoning will result in the developing of faith on science. It is the faith that solidifies the belief in science. Similarly, a Christian will develop faith in the religion by rationalizing that it is the truest path to God. Thus, reason cannot be separated from faith. Now, 5. Aliens and UFOs. That is the way Africans view aliens and or UFOs. Africa does not seem to have problems with the question of whether aliens, extraterrestrial beings, mermaids, gods, goddesses, spirits, elves, fairies, dwarfs, jinn, angels exist or not. The reason is that there is a strong belief that the world is made of physical, material, tangible, and the non-physical, immaterial, spiritual world. This means that human beings and other beings exist simultaneously. In the African orientation, Humans and other living creatures inhabit the physical world, while gods, goddesses, aliens, mermaids, dwarfs, jinn, angels, spirits, elves, and so forth inhabit the spiritual mystical world. The beings in the spiritual mystical world are far superior and far more advanced than human beings because they operate at a high frequency and can appear and disappear or turn into any creature at will. They defy gravity and the laws of motion. The beings in the spiritual mystical world impart knowledge to human beings on earth since they operate at a very high frequency which human science and technology cannot match. Some Africans might say that alien capability is too advanced for crude human technology to detect them. On the other hand, some say that it is easier to contact aliens through spiritual means than through science. Thus, through shamans, traditional religious priests and priestesses, herbalists, spiritualists, soothsayers, and native doctors, some Africans are able to establish communication with God, gods, goddesses, spirits, dwarfs, jinns, angels, mermaids, and so forth on regular basis. Due to the relationship between humans and the aliens, UFOs, extraterrestrial beings, the following are a common facet of African cultural existence. A. There are thousands of secret spiritual mystical societies in Africa. B. Many masquerade dances are believed to have originated from alien beings. C. Due to associating with certain religious shrines and sacred masquerade societies, many Africans undergo spiritual possession, that is trance, resulting in seeing the past and the future. D. The possibility of invisibility to bullets is attained through initiation into certain spiritual lodges and temples. E. No secret can be hidden since the deities have a higher level of consciousness than humans. Hence, the absolute truth about any matter can be obtained in Africa. F. The deities provide knowledge about curative powers of various plants and animals. G. It is quite possible to communicate with ancestral spirits or souls and obtain information about any matter. H. No African will lie while swearing an oath in the name of the ancestors and deities. It is an abomination to do so. In fact, some Africans have suggested that it is time for the continent to forgo Western and Islamic judicial systems and embrace the traditional African system. Why? Because there is no African who will lie while swearing in the name of his or her ancestors and deities. It is believed that the traditional African system will drastically reduce corruption in the continent compared to the Western and Islamic systems. I, through regular contact with alien or extraterrestrial beings, there are some Africans that have developed high level of consciousness to the point that they have telepathic capability as well as engage in teleportation, travel from one dimension to another, and pass through wormholes effortlessly. Yeah. Through contact with other beings, some Africans can change from humans to other animals and other things. This is why it is often told by hunters that sometimes when they are about to shoot or kill wild games in the forest, the games will change into human form and speak in human voice to warn the hunters to desist from hunting them. African hunters often recite stories like this. Okay? It appears that most Africans who have encountered or been abducted by alien or extraterrestrial beings or dwarfs or mermaids often return to Earth with a high level of consciousness. This is why most kidnapped or abducted victims eventually become shamans, herbalists, spiritualists, and native doctors, and so forth, having been exposed to the advanced capabilities of the aliens or UFOs. Therefore, many African religious priests and priestesses, shamans, spiritualists, and so forth develop their spiritual mystical capabilities through exposure to alien magical scientific knowledge. There are individuals who are married to alien beings in Africa. It is common in most ethnic groups to hear of certain women being abducted and married to mermaids in the water. There are also cases where some men are married to alien beings and procreate spiritual children. Thus, in Africa, there is no dramatic change between the ancient times and the modern times in terms of traditional African religious beliefs about the relationship between humans and other beings. Basically, Africa continues the ancient Egyptian and Sumerian spiritual traditions. Africans tend to believe in the duality of human beings in commensurate with the belief in the duality of the world. As a result, there is a strong belief that when a person dies physically, the soul leaves the body and continues to live in the spiritual realm. This contributes to the view that there is a community of the dead just as there is a community of the living. Thus, those who die and leave the physical world end up in the community of the dead in the spiritual world. From the spiritual world, they are reborn into the physical world in a cyclical manner. This is why African societies pay so much attention to the ancestors in the hope that they will return to their families and communities through reincarnation. Through divination and oracular consultation, the living can communicate with the dead and vice versa. For instance, if a person dies mysteriously, a ritual can be performed to communicate with the deceased through the soul to find out the cause of death. Through such contact, the absolute truth is verified. There is a belief that a living human being can be harmed through capturing the soul or spirit of the individual. To avoid such from taking place, many Africans undergo a spiritual ritual intended to fortify their souls so that no individual or entity can harm or tamper with them. In Nigeria, rituals intended to fortify the soul and or the spirit is referred to as self-fortification or born again. Self-fortification rituals are also used to prevent any physical harm through gunshots, machete cuts, and or food poisoning. 7. Divination. Establishing contact or finding information through the application of mystical spiritual means has been part of the human experience for thousands of years. In Africa, it is embedded in the religious culture. Divination is used when physical investigative procedures are unable to unravel the fact or truth of a case. There are no secrets that cannot be discovered through divination. In fact, information about the past, present, and future can be discovered through divination or oracular consultation with ancestral beings, gods, goddesses, spirits, dwarfs, angels, and jinn. It is strongly believed that divination is more reliable than scientific investigation because it involves both physical and spiritual means to get information. Among the Ijaws, divination is used to find out the cause of death, paternity of a child, the outcome of a war, and so forth. Anything that science cannot detect can be uncovered through divination. For instance, if an individual is killed and the police cannot identify the culprit after investigation due to lack of physical or strong circumstantial evidence, through divination, the culprit can be identified and punished. Thus, in Africa, there is no such thing as a cold case except the family and the community do not wish to pursue the matter spiritually. This is a picture of an African diviner trying to use divination to find out information about an event or a situation or a thing. Cowries are some of the things that African diviners use to find out the truth or the absolute truth about any matter. 8. Depth of scientific and spiritual knowledge. In terms of physical science, Africa is less developed. On the other hand, it is highly developed spiritually, mystically. It is comparable to Tibet, some parts of India, China, Native America, Native Australia, and so forth. Some Africans might say that spiritually, Africa is the most advanced continent in the world. In fact, Africa has categories of societies based on the level of spirituality. There is the Western component, the Islamic component, the African traditional component, and the super mystical African society that even most Africans cannot see or experience because they are at the surface of reality. At the super mystical African society, only those who have developed third eyes are capable of teleportation, telepathic communication, can travel all over the world without using a plane, can change into other animals and creatures, control their destinies, and can see into the past, present, and the future communicate oracularly with ancestral beings, gods, goddesses, angels, dwarfs, aliens, UFOs, and so forth, operate at this level. Some individuals who exist at this super mystical level of African societies cannot be killed by ordinary mortals. Some individuals can communicate with other animals and plants as well as change into other creatures. It is strongly believed here that in the future, the African spiritual mystical capabilities will be used to develop some of the most advanced technologies in the world. Currently, Africans have not been able to activate these capabilities into scientific technological development because of the psychological roadblocks that colonialism, Christianity, and Islam instituted by condemning African cultures and religions through the educational and religious systems. When Africans liberate themselves by getting rid of the roadblocks, the magical sciences will be openly and fully utilized to create technological wonders. Conclusion: the West should do what the Germans did prior to the Second World War. They visited various parts of the world to consult with people who had mystical experiences and explored ancient technologies. They used the knowledge gained to develop some of the most sophisticated military weapons prior to the Second World War. If Western scholars and scientists pay visit to traditional religious priests and priestesses, spiritualists, shamans, and herbalists, they will gain tremendously in enhancing the understanding of physical science. Based on the discussion above, it is apparent that the West deviated from the generally held view that the world is made of both tangible and intangible parts to the exclusive adoption of the view that nature and the universe is limited to its physical, tangible attributes. The change came about due to the European Renaissance, which resulted in the adoption of reason and logic, science, and secular humanism. Due to the scientific orientation, any phenomenon which is not capable of being observed, measured, quantified, experimented, and tested does not exist in the Western viewpoint today. As a result, the West objected to the notion of God or a higher authority and the existence of aliens or extraterrestrial beings and or UFOs, since such entities are not capable of being scientifically studied and documented. On the other hand, Africa continues to maintain its ancient belief system, which maintains that nature and the universe has both physical, material, intangible, and non-physical, immaterial, intangible characteristics or attributes. Hence, there are humans and other beings which are described as God, gods, goddesses, angels, dwarfs, mermaids, spirits, jinn, and so forth. In the West, it is not acceptable to publicly state that one has seen or encountered an alien being or a UFO. In Africa, people are encouraged to tell publicly their encounter with aliens or UFOs. Moreover, people are encouraged to inform their families and communities about such encounters so that oracular consultation could be established with the alien beings. The West, through science, tries to dominate nature, while Africa works with nature due to the realization that the world is made of both physical and spiritual components. In Africa, what is scientifically impossible is quite possible. Hence, Africa contains unique knowledge and experiences that cannot be explained scientifically. The closest Western scientific knowledge that comes close to the mystical experiences in Africa is quantum physics. Some Africans suggest that Egyptologists should consult with indigenous African shamans and religious priests and priestesses in order to unravel the mystery about the Egyptian pyramids. For further information about African spiritualism, mysticism, visit the Vibes in 5 TV on YouTube. This channel is based in Ghana and deals with the subject matter. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Please subscribe to the channel and listen to other presentations on the Knowledge Seekers list.